This is Film Dad coming at you from the basement of Critterton.
Is this her new opening? Hi, and welcome to Film Fam inspired by true events. I'm Heather.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Hello, my name is Zoe Gray. I've not yet emancipated myself from my parents, so I am still, as of this moment, the daughter of both Brian and Heather Gray.
We are the Grays, and we're your Film Fam. Today, we are talking about classic adventure movie, AFI Top 100 film, Indiana Jones. Raiders of the Lost Ark is what it's actually called. Raiders of the Lost Ark with introducing Indiana Jones.
I think originally it was just Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
But now when they market it, they say Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
That's
thought
what I
it
was going to say,
vice
and then I was like,
versa.
wait, it's Raiders.
Yeah. So guys, just for context, in case I'm just like unfunny
Oh, right,
and
yeah,
dead
because
today.
Zoe has a PSA. Zoe has a COVID vaccine PSA to share.
Everyone, go get your second shot. Please get your second shot. But immediately after you do so, do not go to a party and drink alcohol because you might end up throwing up on the streets of New York and having chills and a fever. So don't do the first part, but don't do the other part. And
Excellent. Great hypothetical.
yes,
It was a cast party for a show that she had just been in, an online show. And
it was
the party
outdoors, socially distanced. Yes, of course. I socially distanced myself away and then was very ill. And it is now the morning after that. I am just toasty, by which I mean don't have a fever anymore, but my skin still feels weird. So, but I'm so glad we're doing Indiana Jones because I love this movie and I think it's going to cheer me right up.
Okay, is your skin weird? Like you need moisturizer, or
It sort of feels like all of like the organs in my body, including my skin, are limp,
oh,
which is a weird feeling. It sure is.
limpy skin. So this is the first time you've ever thrown up from drinking.
I would like to say that I threw up from the COVID shot. Actually, the only other time that I ever threw up after drinking was when I had pneumonia the same time that I went to a graduation party and drank. And that night I also had like crazy fever.
Yeah.
And I think
Don't.
just maybe I shouldn't.
And also by drinking, you had one glass of wine.
Look, I'm 5'1".
No, but I wanted people like you weren't drinking till you threw up. You had one glass of wine.
For the record, Zoe weighs
responsible.
47 pounds.
You are responsible, but yeah.
But I
you
should
could've-
not have done that.
You
and
should have
maybe
Googled.
don't do that.
COVID.
But it's always a combination. The only times I've ever thrown up after drinking is when I was also, at the same time, stupid and drank too much.
So Zoe is not Marion Ravenwood able to drink some big old Tibetan men under the table is what we're hearing.
I mean, I'd like to see her after a second dose of Pfizer.
So yeah, we're talking about Indiana Jones, which I used to say that Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark was my favorite movie. And I wasn't saying it was the best movie, just that it was my personal favorite movie from my childhood that I still held on as like, that's my favorite movie.
Right, but you had not seen Borat yet.
I'm going to guess as to what you are going to say your favorite movie is now. Is it
Okay, go for it. You get
Is
three
it-
guesses.
The Philadelphia Story?
No.
That was all I got. Dad, take the second guess.
It happened one night.
Oh, no. Third guess.
Rushmore.
Parasite.
Ooh. Rushmore is really good. Parasite is really good. Those are two very good movies. I don't know. It's just now that I've been watching the AFI Top 100 films of all time, I'm actually like, I don't think Indiana Jones should be on this list. And I have other favorite movies now, I think, because I've seen like some of the best American films ever made. But best doesn't necessarily mean favorite. Brian, do you want to talk about like what's your relationship with this movie?
My relationship with the movie. I don't remember the first time I saw it. It was not in the theater. It was probably on VHS or maybe cable or something. I do remember I saw it young enough that I didn't follow the entire plot. I didn't catch things like the Nazis were keeping up with Indy because they got a copy of one side of the amulet
Ah, that's a
burned
cool.
into
That's
that
a good
guy's
detail.
hand. But then they didn't have the other side of the amulets. They didn't know to subtract one whatever from the height. Uh,
They're digging
these
in the
are
wrong place. That's the
these are
line, right?
important plot points that I didn't really get. I think I figured they were just following Indy, and that's how they were figuring that out. Even getting to knowing that they should go to Marion's place. I'm still not sure if they followed Indy there or if they used information from Belloc, who knew about Abner.
No, the guy with the Nazi who follows him, his name is like
Oh,
Talk?
Toft. It's something
Toft?
like that.
Zoe, look it up. That guy was actually on the plane in the background when Indy was going
Okay, so they
to
were
bed, I
following
think.
Indy.
So
For some reason, I was thinking maybe Belloc knew about Abner
Tot.
through Indy, but
Tot, that's it. Well,
okay.
but was as a child of the 80s, was it one of your favorite movies?
I don't think I ever would have said it was my favorite movie. It was up there, and maybe my biggest interaction with Raiders of the Lost Ark was by means of the Atari 2600 Raiders of the Lost Ark game,
Oh, yes.
which required two joysticks to play. And you could play it by yourself, but my sister and I would play it together. We'd trade off. Somebody is controlling Indy, walking around and using the whip, and somebody is controlling the inventory and what Indy's holding or what he's using, all the special amulets and things. And I played that game a lot more than I watched the movie because the movie's only 2 hours, but that game we played hours and hours.
How about you, Zoe? What's your
I
background with
definitely don't
Raiders?
remember the first time I saw it because I think I was so young. I mean, yeah, like it was one of your favorite movies, and it's like one of the more family friendly of the movies we've discussed here. The like adventure, and so I think I was probably pretty young when I saw it because I don't remember, but I do remember similar to Dad. Like I don't think the plot all got me, but like certain. I mean, the figure of Indy is so like larger than life. Like it's just this unmistakable form of like him with the hat, with the whip, the whole opening scene where he reaches out and grabs his hat again, or the stuff with the snakes. Like there's so many quotable, recognizable moments that I think really stuck with me, even if intricacies of the plot escaped me the first time. I actually, controversial opinion. I think I don't know if I went back right now and rewatched it as well, I still would, but I liked Temple of Doom best.
That is
I
controversial for
was
sure.
It is for sure. I think I really liked I the most recent time I rewatched it, I realized that the main issue with Temple of Doom is not having Karen Allen. Like like
And
she
and racism, a little
well,
bit of
right.
racism.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
lot
I
of
Sort
think
of,
I just
except every
really
other Indy movie, uh, Indy is going into other parts of the world and taking their stuff for white people's museums. And in the second movie, he's actually trying to recover
Yeah,
something
that's true.
for the people to whom it actually belongs.
That's true.
I just thought it was so metal to like rip a guy's heart out and like eat like that.
I saw that movie
That
with
was
my
awesome.
grandma
Oh,
in theaters, and she thought it was a bit too much, but I really liked it. The first two were definitely in my personal wheelhouse. It's like investigation, supernatural history, like some kind of, like conspiracies about magic things. Like I love stuff like that. That's the kind of role-playing games I like. I even read like some of the like young Indiana Jones books and things like that. That's really in my specific thing that I like. I like that kind of thing, like more than I like sci-fi. I like old-timey adventure with some kind of paranormal, supernatural thing stuck in it.
Yeah.
well, when he was, coming up with this, like Spielberg wanted to do a Bond film. That's
Right.
what it was like. Spielberg and Lucas were on vacation in Hawaii in like 77, and Spielberg was like, I really wish I could do a Bond movie. And George Lucas was like, well, it's not quite Bond, but I have this thing. And I think it has some of um that like sensibility. He's just so cool,
Right.
like yeah.
He's very confident, but he's more like vulnerable than Bond. He's not
Right.
quite as good at what he does. as James Bond.
Which I like. I
Yeah.
think that makes
Yeah.
him so likable. Also,
For
like
sure.
update on how my morning is going. I didn't have any sugar, so I put honey in my tea, but some got on the outside of the cup and I touched it and I just accidentally rubbed it into my hair. It's just a whole
Babe.
comedy of errors over here.
Well, I'm going to be talking about the true events that inspired Indiana Jones, the series Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm going to probably call it Indiana Jones a lot, even though we're talking specifically, I think, mostly about Raiders. Lucas and Spielberg have both said it was based or inspired by old serial films of explorers that used to be shown in movie theaters like in the 40s and 50s. And I'm going to talk about what inspired those serials, the actual people who inspired those serials. And the hero, the specific guy who, if you look up who inspired Indiana Jones, this is the guy that everyone says inspired the character. His name is Roy Chapman Andrews. So he is an academic, an archaeologist, and an adventurer. Sound familiar? Roy Chapman Andrews was born in Beloit, Wisconsin in 1884. Indiana Jones was supposed to be born in 1899. So Indy's supposed to be younger, the younger generation. Andrews, he spent his childhood outside in Wisconsin, playing in the fields and in the streams. He was a real like outdoors boy. And when he was a teenager, he had his first brush with death. He was in a boating accident. He was canoeing with one of his school teachers in the flood-raised waters of Rock River. And they both fell into the river because it was too fast and too much water happening.
Too furious.
Too fast, too furious. And they were swept away by the current and swept away like from each other. And the teacher, they weren't able to help each other. The teacher did not survive. And Andrews, he ended up grabbing onto a tree root that was like a tree on the edge of the river that was, the tree roots were like under the water. And then he was able to like pull himself up from that tree root and survived. And he said, I must have been born under a lucky star, is what he said, because I survived this and my teacher didn't. And then he went on to like survive so many different things. So he taught himself taxidermy, which at the time,
Hell yeah. Why do so many of these stories involve people doing taxidermy?
well, Jaws did. I think because at the time it was like a profession to taxidermy things, especially if you were into science, like biological science, you're taxidermying animals.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
kind of an awesome aesthetic. I'm not gonna lie.
I guess all it requires is for everyone around you not to think it's creepy.
Yeah, it's not always creepy. He taxidermied deer for local hunters to pay for his college. So after college, that was 1906, he took a train from Wisconsin to New York to pursue a job at the American Museum of Natural History, which we've gone to a lot. And there were no jobs. They're like, no, we don't have anything. And he's like, I'll just wash the floors. I'll mop the floors. And they were like, you have a college degree. And he's like, I don't care. This is where I want to be. So they gave him the job. And he worked just at first mopping the floors of that museum. And then he started helping taxidermy. Because if you haven't been to that
Get your
museum,
foot in the door.
yeah, think about any natural history museum. There's always like these displays of animals from around the globe that are taxidermied. That was what he started doing for them there. Just a year later, in 1907, he got sent on his first expedition to collect the skeleton of a whale that had washed ashore in Long Island. It was February. It was really cold. He had to go to the beach. And when they got there, the huge whale carcass was being covered by sand in like a storm that was coming in. And they had to dig out these bones of this whale through the like 50 tons of whale flesh. Like it wasn't like it was already bones. It was flesh. And they had to get in there and they had to pull all, and then their fingers were like freezing because they're sticking their fingers in freezing flesh of a dead whale. And they ended up gathering every single bone out of this huge giant whale and over 3 days.
And he's like, I want to do this all the time.
He really, really did. And think about the big blue whale in that main big room in the Natural History Museum, you know, the huge whale and that big 3-foot,
Yeah.
like that's the kind of whale that it's not that whale, but things like that. Like he was bringing back bones so that they could make something like that. So He was like, okay, well, I'm super into whales now. Whales are my thing. So from there, spent the next few years tracking whales and studying their behaviors and writing about whales because no one had really been caring that much about whales. They're like, whales exist and we kill them for things, but we're not really studying them. I mean, it was early in various ways. It was, what I say, it was like 1908 at this point. So he was like, I'm going to make whales my thing. And he goes to Asia and he goes to Korea and he discovered a population of gray whales that they thought was previously extinct. And then in Japan, he learned to speak Japanese. He stayed at a famous Japanese brothel called Jimpuro, which means nectarine, and he tried opium. So he's that kind of
Alrighty
adventurer. Then. He's not just studying whales.
No, he's not like a fucking nerd.
No, apparently not.
No,
He's
he
going
likes to
for it.
party.
He likes to party. He's a get my COVID vaccine, have a glass of wine kind of
Yeah.
guy.
Those
Feeling
opium
man.
parties where everyone just kind of lies on the couch.
So on that trip to Asia, I'm going to list different things because he actually wrote like 15 books and each chapter of the book has 47. I mean, each book has like 47 chapters and then each chapter is a huge adventure. So I'm not including every adventure. Sometimes I'm just going to list things. So on that trip, in Asia, he spent 2 weeks stranded on a deserted island in Indonesia.
How
He
did
survived.
that happen?
I actually was researching and just skimming the book, and then Brian's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just reading these books because they're
Nice.
very interesting." And they were very inspirational. Like I said, they inspired all these serials of like, oh, here's real life adventurers having like archaeologists having really cool adventures, and this is where this came from.
And here's the time they made me walk the plank.
Well, close to it. So he survived typhoons, heat stroke, poisoned bamboo stakes, headhunters, a 20-foot and 20-foot pythons. He also he hated snakes, so that's a thing that maybe why they use that for Indiana Jones because he talked a lot about different times that he had to be around snakes and he hated them.
And his father hated rats.
I have a question, which is, why were people trying to hit him with poison bamboo stakes and etc.? Like, was he doing the Indiana Jones thing of going in and just disrupting native communities?
Oh, well, probably, but also because he was going to places where they had never even seen a white person before. He was going to places where it was not like towns and cities and the governor. It was going out to places where it was just tribal and they didn't always like just let everybody in.
Or they were just scientists. They're like, do white people bleed? Does poison work on white people?
I think usually he was the one that was in danger in these areas because he was going places where he wasn't invited. But that was what he was trying to do, is like, I want to go places and study the things that we've never seen. So I have to go someplace that nobody's gone before to try to see what's there. And then the people who there are like, nah, we don't want you here.
We live
But
here.
But he wasn't going with like an army or a bunch of people who could do anything much to the people. He was always kind of on the back foot in danger.
Man, this guy. How many times should he have died?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, I'll get to that. At one point, he's out with a ship and they caught, when he was still doing the whole whale thing, which is what he did at first. They caught a 72-foot whale. It was a whaling ship, I guess. And they had caught a whale and he just wanted to be there to see what was going on. He was trying to learn about, see whaling up close and stuff. And he went out on a smaller boat to take photographs. And why they had the whale caught, but before they'd pulled it onto the bigger boat or ship, the whale smashed its tail down on the smaller boat that he was in.
No.
And smashed it, and everyone fell into the water. And this is the point where sharks started coming and biting the whale, and then biting the people all the people were like trying to get on like some of the wood and trying to get back to the larger boat, like throw us something, help us. And the captain was like, "No, get that whale, get the whale, get it on board. We don't care about these guys. This whale is worth a ton of money to us. And we don't care." And so they all had to make their way back to the ship without any help because they were just dealing with this whale. And some of them died, but not our Born Under a Lucky Star, Roy Chapman Andrews. He survived. That was one of the things that he survived. Then this first trip, although he knew basic first aid and stuff. And so on this first trip, he also delivered 2 babies, pulled several teeth, and amputated a man's mangled hand.
Oh.
Like he was also having.
Damn.
I mean, if you're going to amputate a hand, choose the mangled one.
Well, he was like, just okay. I know first aid. I guess this is what I'm doing now. And at the end of the first trip, he had collected 50 mammals, 425 birds, and a new species of ant. And he was only 25 years old at that point.
I mean, no offense, but like this guy's cooler than Indiana Jones, maybe. Or he's just more
pretty-
in the shit. He was not in a family-friendly movie.
Well, we only saw 4, I guess, movies about Indy, but this guy has 15 books, so he has a lot of different stories. In 1914, he got a master's degree in science, and he married Yvette Borup. And she was a very cool woman. She was an American citizen who was born in Paris. Her father was an American military attaché stationed in France and then also later Berlin. So she grew up among Europe's like elite and the intellectuals. And she would actually make headlines whenever she came back to the US because like of her glamorous lifestyle and partying and socializing with aristocrats. And she was actually really close friends with Princess Victoria Louise, the daughter of Kaiser Wilhelm.
Ah,
So Yvette was a photographer, and when she married Roy Chapman Andrews, she went with him on the next expedition as the official photographer and videographer. And she had like a mobile darkroom and mobile video room that someone had invented that she took with her out into the field. And the trip was basically their honeymoon. And they spent 18 months traveling through China, Tibet, Burma, and Mongolia, collecting zoological specimens and photographing Central Asia,
Wow.
some stuff for the first time that people in the US had ever seen.
we should do that. We haven't had a honeymoon yet.
Not an 18-month honeymoon.
Not a trip that we've designated. This is our honeymoon.
Well, when the reporters asked her about the trip, before you decide we want to do this exact thing, she said, we traveled 35,000 miles. We did 2,000 of those miles on horseback. Mostly we slept in sleeping bags. The wolves howled about us. The wild dogs threatened. Sometimes we followed a tiger to its lair and waited until it returned and shot it so that a dangerous marauder might no longer threaten us at night. We were shot at by bandits, but neither of us were hurt, and we brought back 3,000 specimens from the interior of Asia.
Yeah, I'm on board. Sign me up.
So this was a time where they were like, let's kill animals we've never seen before so we can bring them back and put them in the museum. So when I say they brought back animals, I mean they killed an animal. Luckily,
Bring
though,
back 3,000 live animals.
no, they didn't bring back 425 live birds, but they never got a tiger. And they tried several times to track down different kinds of tigers to bring a tiger, but they were never able to kill a tiger.
Aw,
No, I'm happy about that.
The
So
tiger.
the worst honeymoon ever.
didn't even get a tiger. So Yvette's photographs from the trip were published in Roy Chapman Andrews' very popular books. It was called Camps and Trails in China. And she also authored 6 of the book's chapters. And these books that Andrew wrote and with Yvette's photographs are actually like really popular, and newspapers all over carried the stories about them in a kind of serial manner. Like, hey, what are these two up to now? You know, like this famous party girl who's an American but grew up in Europe, and this like homegrown Wisconsin adventurer got married, and then their honeymoon is traveling around an adventure. So it was very popular, and their exploits were always being carried in the magazines. Plus they had videos, which is part of how it got so popular. In one of Andrew's books, On the Trail of Ancient Man, he recalls the 20 times he nearly lost his life in the early years of their expeditions. He said, 2 were from drowning in typhoons. 1 was when our boat was charged by a wounded whale. Once my wife and I were nearly eaten by wild dogs. Once we were in great danger of fanatical Lama priests. 2 were close calls when I fell over cliffs. 1 was I was nearly caught by a huge python, and twice I might have been killed by bandits.
Okay, only one of those things has ever happened to me.
Which one? The fanatical Lama priest?
No, the almost eaten by wild dogs.
Here's my thing. If there's one time that you're like, oh shit, I almost just died falling off this cliff. Like, why? How are you gonna go do that again?
That's
You're
his
gonna be
thing.
like, I'm gonna do the same thing again, and also like 2 typhoons. 2 typhoons.
2 typhoons. That was
Boy,
his thing, just to
howdy.
go out there in the conditions. So between 1922 and 1939, he went out on 5 more expeditions that to previously poorly mapped or unknown areas of Central Asia. And his mission to Mongolia, to the Gobi Desert, was his most famous trip that was really being watched by people in the US. And there was a lot of film about it. The purpose was to find geographical, archaeological, botanical, zoological, and geological data, but especially to discover fossils of early hominids. And they had this idea that like maybe first humans were in Asia. They're wrong. They're in Africa. So they didn't find that. But they did find really just a treasure trove of dinosaur fossils in the Gobi. The Gobi is a huge desert, Zoe. It's like, I'm going to say 1 million acres, but I'm making that up. Just imagine, very, very big.
Acres.
Imagine
I know
our
no one
house,
believed that.
our property, but bigger,
So-
much bigger than
and then a desert. To do that Gobi Desert expedition, they brought 40 men, 8 cars, and 150 camels to carry stuff. And at that date, that was the biggest land scientific expedition to ever leave the U.S. And the big thing about it was they brought cars into
Oh yeah.
the desert, which they could only usually go like 4 miles an hour because it was
On camels or
no, in the
oh,
cars.
in the cars. They
Once
could only
they were
go
in the
far.
cars, because it was rocky and sandy and muddy and just different, really bad terrain. There was no roads. They're just driving these Model T looking cars through the desert, and it was kind of terrible. And they called one of their cars the agony box.
They should have used dune buggies.
And they didn't have them. So in the Gobi, they discovered a site full of dinosaur bones, even complete dinosaur skeletons and ancient mammal bones, the most ever found on a single trip. And the most famous thing they found was an intact dinosaur egg. And they thought at the time, like the public thought, the museum thought that was the first dinosaur egg they'd ever found. But actually a French archaeologist had found one before, but it was less popularized. So
That's
they had thought at the
awesome, though.
time they found the very first dinosaur eggs. And then they're like, hey, Rockefeller, give us some more money. I'll sell you this dinosaur egg. Hey.
They sold it. God damn.
They sold a lot of them because they had multiple and they wanted more funding. So then these people just had like dinosaur eggs that they owned. They didn't put it in a museum like Indy wanted. So the Gobi was one of the places that they were threatened by bandits. I read a lot of cool stories. Like I said, I got caught up reading about this guy. And one day they're coming over a hill. They're at the top of the hill in their old like jalopy. Actually, it was a Dodge. At that time, it was called Dodge Brothers. And the Dodge car was the only that had ever climbed the Twin Peaks of San Francisco higher than any other car. And it was also the first automobile to ever reach the floor of the Grand Canyon and climb back out under its own power. So it was like had the strongest engine. So they're in these jalopies and they're cresting over this hill, and they saw some men at the bottom of the hill on horseback with guns, kind of like threatening them with their guns, and they couldn't back up the hill. Like, so Andrews just drove as fast as he could at them and shot his gun.
Oh, man.
And some of them rode away on their horses, but one stayed and shot at them. And so then Andrews shot closer to him because he was kind of just shooting his gun to kind of like get out of here, and got really close to hitting him from a moving car. And then that guy rode off too. So that's one of the times where they were like,
That's totally a scene out of Indiana Jones.
It really is.
well, the Gobi Desert's also where like the most kind of Indiana Jones-ish snake story takes place. So members of the expedition were sleeping or like starting to doze off in their tents at night in the Gobi. And one noticed a pit viper slithering into the tent. And before getting out of bed and just putting his feet on the ground, he looked down and saw there were even more snakes. 2 were coiled around his bedposts. In the tent. 2 were coiled around his bedposts. 2 were trying to crawl into his bed. And he like calls out, and other members in their tents also found vipers in their shoes, in their supply boxes, in their gun cases, and in their hats. In total, they counted 47 venomous snakes invading their camp that night.
Oh man.
Yeah, and vipers are very venomous. So they had promised the local priests that they wouldn't kill anything because they were on sacred ground, according to the local like priests that lived out there. But they did kill the snakes. They're like, we don't trust how to get these snakes out of our tents without killing them. We don't know how to do this. So they did kill the snakes. And then the next night, like basically 47 more vipers came back into their tent.
Maybe they should just stop being right there.
Well, and then they got rid of them. And then the next night, the third night, more snakes came back. So finally, they're like, there's just a never ending supply of snakes that want to snuggle up and keep warm with us at night in the desert. So we are going to move our camp. So then
Sure.
they did move their camp.
Wow.
Andrews, like, he hated snakes, but he said, to meet the popular conception of an explorer, a man must have suffered cold, heat, starvation, fever, attacks from wild animals and savage natives, and must have been bitten by snakes. Snakes are essential. If you haven't had snakes, you can't be a proper explorer.
Oh shit! I feel like I got all the others just like right now, last night, but I'm not there on the snakes one yet.
Oh, I've been around pit vipers.
Well, let's get back to how he says savage natives, because he
Yeah.
was that kind of explorer. He did talk some shit about the native people he met in the desert, kind of like infantilizing them, or just because they have much lower technology. Like, he just thought that they were like childish and dumb or something, which was not cool. But like I said before, it was not cool. It was racist. I should say it was racist. And he was like a guy who, I don't know that he was always racist in all the situations. I think it was more like when he was in civilized parts of China or Japan, then people were his friends. But when he went out into the desert where people had never seen any of the things that he was bringing, then he was like, oh, these are like little children. But like I said, he was usually the one that was in danger and trying to get people to like him and let him stay alive in these situations. So at least in that way, he wasn't bringing a lot of danger to them. He was just like a guy with a small team. One story, I have my notes, but one story off the top of my head is he was in Mongolia and some people came up and they're like, who are you? Get out of here. We don't like you. And when they came up, he was shaving and they don't have a lot of facial hair. And they were like looking at him like, what are you doing? You're just shaving your face? Like, that's weird. And one of the guys who was with him had dentures on the top. And he took his dentures out and they were like, oh my God, now what's happening? And then another guy had dentures top and bottom and he took both of them out. And then they were like, wow, this is amazing. These guys, like, they shave their faces with knives and they can take
They
their
have
teeth
no
out.
teeth.
And then another guy had a glass eye and he took his eye out. And then they were like,
This is not actually representative though of I think
No.
that most people don't have dentures and glasses.
yeah, I'll get to that. So
And the next guy had a fake head.
leg. Yeah, no. Then this guy took his eye out, and then they were like, "Wow, this is amazing. Please go on with this amazing thing you're showing us. This is great." But it became such a story that when he went back, like 2 years later, they're like, "Hey, it's you. Show us. Take your teeth out. Take your eye out. We want to see it." And he was like, "Yeah, we didn't have those guys with us this time. None of us could do that." And they were like, "Aw."
We needed a better group that had a better time chewing and seeing.
Yeah. Well, these were, venturing was hard. So sometimes you lost your eye
got
or
bitten by a snake on the eyeball. Who are we to judge?
for real.
Or on the teeth.
Well, another example of when they were in danger, Roy Chapman Andrews, and he had a British friend with him named Collins, who he made fun of a lot for being British and saying things like quite or rather.
Yes.
And
Brits.
they were hunting a huge wild cow that they wanted to bring back because they didn't have the specimen in the museum. And they were too noisy while they were hunting, and they ended up being caught by local bandits. There's a lot of bandit action going on. They got caught by local bandits, and they were brought before the bandit chief. And Andrews told him, like, as quick as he could, he's like, we're just American missionaries. And he said that because American missionaries are poor and, like, not worth ransoming. No one wants them, really, and they don't have a lot to give. So he was still like, the bandit chief was like, oh, well, okay, then I guess we'll just kill you. And he's like, but wait, I see that your hand is bandaged and I'm a doctor, which he wasn't.
Not a
And
doctor.
no. And he's like, I'm a doctor. I'll try to help you, because he's just trying to figure out, how do I get out of
Well,
this?
he does know enough first aid to be able to cut off someone. Is this the guy whose hand he cut off? Because that, damn.
No, but this is a later trip. So the bandit chief was like, great, we really need a doctor. We've been fighting a lot with different bandits, and many of my men are wounded, and I got this bullet wound in my hand 2 days ago. Now his lie worked, but
Some guy driving at me in a car shot at me through the window.
so this lie worked, but now Andrews was stuck actually having to try to do like medicine on these guys or be killed, maybe, because it was still a very precarious situation. So he just kept bullshitting them. He's like, oh yeah, we'll come back to the temple where I have my medical bag and I will help you. And so the bandit chief and some bandits like escorted them back to the temple, which was a religious temple that they were staying at. And the bandits held them at gunpoint the entire time. And then once they're back at the temple, Andrews got his medical kit that he carried with him, like a normal medical kit that he has as an explorer. And he just like washed the bandit's hand, and then he trimmed like some of the skin around the wound, and he put like some ointment on it. And he's like trying to think, like, what else can I do to make it seem like I'm a doctor? He bandaged it back up, and then he put he felt like he knew from living in China that they really put a lot of stock in internal medicine. And so he's like, I need to have him drink something, because then it'll seem like I'm really doing more. So he put a malaria pill in some water, but said it was like something else, and then gave it to him, and he drank it. And then the bandit chief was like,
I'm
all
not
right.
afraid of malaria. Awesome.
Well, they didn't tell him it was malaria. He's like, and this is also for your hand.
Right.
And so the bandit chief was like, okay, maybe. Okay, but I want you to look at another man. This is my most trusted captain. And he came in. The captain came in. His head was bandaged. And when Andrews unwrapped the dressing, the guy's brain was like poking. Like there was like a wound that has his brain was exposed. So he was
that
like,
is maybe above his pay grade.
yeah, he was like, wow, I don't really know what to do about this. This is it. We're gonna die, because I don't know how to
Fix
do anything about.
Skull.
Oh, it's
That's
like
when
trepanation or something.
Trepanation.
Oh, that's, I think, when you drill. But I
Well,
assume
that's
he
kind
had
of
been.
to alleviate pressure on the head.
Right,
I don't
right.
think there was any. There was already a hole.
There was already a hole.
I
You're
think
right.
for this you need to cut a piece of non-reactive metal and bend it to the shape of the skull and put it in and
See,
and
Dad
complete
would know
the
what to
skull.
do. Well, so
They
he
used to do
did.
that with coins.
He
sometimes.
kind of did something like that. So he took out a straight razor, which they had never seen, and he shaved the hair around it so that it, and then he cleaned around on the skull area, and then he got a new bandage, and he put the bandage really nicely over the hole in the head. and then he gave him a malaria pill and some water, and was like, all right.
Maybe it really did
the-
help them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I can't do anything about your brain, but
You won't.
you won't
have
get malaria.
Yeah, well, the captain was like, all right, this looks so much better. I'm really happy. I feel better about this.
I think maybe they based that scene in Spies Like Us off of this story.
Where they had to go in, like they're in Turkey or Afghanistan or something.
Yeah, and he had to like do an appendectomy.
Yeah. Okay, so then they brought in another guy. This guy had his leg almost shot off. So he cleaned it. He used like a basic stitch, sewed up what he could, and bandaged it. He's like, okay. And so then over the next 3 hours until midnight, they kept bringing in more people for him to treat. And finally at midnight, he was like,
Did they all become friends at the end?
Well, he was like, I'm all out of medicine, which he wasn't. He's like, I need to make more overnight. Like, he just needed to stop. He's like, I'm exhausted. I'm going to mess up and get us killed. So I'm going to say I need to make more medicine overnight. So he got like 5 hours of sleep. And at dawn, there was a big line of people outside waiting to see him. I guess these bandits were all fucked up or something because so many of them needed help.
Every single one had holes in their skull.
Yeah. So by 5 p.m., he had treated 76 wounds.
Whoa.
And
Jeez.
all
I mean,
he really
honestly,
did.
though, he's pretending to be a doctor, but he probably did help.
No,
by
yeah, he cleaned them
having, like,
all.
yeah.
He put disinfectant or ointment, and then he wrapped them in clean bandages because some of them just had, like, I guess, dung that they would just
Right,
put
like
on
having
it.
sterile
Yeah.
bandages could really help against infection, like right off the bat.
Right. So in that way, he was definitely helping. At the end of the evening, Andrews and Collins, they went before the bandit chief and said, he was like, look, I've done all I can for you. Please let us depart in peace. And the bandit chief was like, well, my men really like you here. You're being really helpful. And they will not be happy if I let you leave, but you can run away in the night and I won't have them look for you until the morning and it'll be too late. And so that's what they did. And that's how
So
they were
did
able
become friends
to
in
escape.
a way.
So one last snake story. So Andrews was in Indonesia and his guide, a boy named Miranda, suddenly stopped him on the path and whispered like, snake, big snake, and pointed to a tree overhanging the trail. And Andrews looked, but he like couldn't see it. And Miranda pointed again. He's like, right there, it's there, big, big snake. And then the leaves fluttered in the wind and the scene kind of changed and he could see that one of the big branches of the tree wasn't a branch at all. It was a huge python, half as thick as a grown man. So like as thick as Zoe. Half as thick as a grown man, and it was just waiting, like hanging over the trail, waiting for like a pig or a deer, or in this case, a man to walk underneath, and then it would descend on them and just squeeze them and swallow it whole. So this was like a...
Just like John Voight in Anaconda.
I never saw that.
He plays a Peruvian, I believe, somehow.
Yeah, that guy. No, I'm not seeing it. So Andrews was like, oh shit. He moves way back and then he shoots this snake with his rifle and it crashes to the ground and it's writhing and shaking. So he moves even farther back. He's like, maybe I just made it mad. And what if this big snake comes after us? But then it stopped and moving and they approached it and then they pulled it straight and measured it and it was 20 feet long.
Wow.
Ooh.
Yeah. Then in the late 1920s, due to political issues in Asia and the Great Depression in the US, he was forced to leave the Gobi. He needed to come back. He and Yvette divorced in 1931. While they're married, Yvette and Roy Chapman Andrews had two sons, George Burrup Andrews in 1917 and Roy
Wait,
Kevin
George Burrup?
Burrup.
Andrew? Oh, okay. Go on.
Her last name was Burrup.
Got it.
Borup. Yvette Burrup. And so George Burrup, Burrup Andrews, and Roy Kevin Andrews, known as Kevin. He was born in 1924. But the first man to visit her when Kevin was born was not Roy Chapman Andrews, but Harold Sinclair Chips Smallwood.
That is so many cool names.
Well, yeah. His nickname is Chips. Harold Sinclair.
Yeah, but in America, they call him Fries.
Yeah, he was a British lieutenant colonel, I think. So he visited her first. And on the eve of Kevin's marriage, nearly 30 years later, to Nancy Cummings, the daughter of E.E. Cummings, Yvette told Kevin that Chip Smallwood, not Roy Chapman Andrews, was his real father.
On the eve of the... I would be, no offense, so mad if you decided to tell me something like that on the eve of my... Like, way to steal my thunder, first of all.
That's true. That's true. Kevin also became an archaeologist and a writer, and he was especially known for writing about his travels in Greece. And Yvette died in 1959 in a traffic accident near Bajaban de Esgueva, a province of Burgos, Spain. And she was 68. Roy Chapman Andrews actually became the director of the Natural History Museum in New York. So a place where he'd originally started mopping floors. In 1934, he became the director. In 1942, he was now remarried. He retired, and he and his wife Wilhelmina, they moved to a country estate called Pond Woods in Connecticut. And then he wrote more books about his adventures. And in the late 50s, he moved to Carmel Valley, California. And he died in 1960 in California. So I thought that was really interesting to think that he was still living in 1960.
Yeah. Well, he was
Like-
born in 1884, was it?
Yeah, he was
So-
born in 1884. So
So
He-
86 years old.
So that was before, my time. But Zoe, your grandpa Corey would have been 29 and living in California then. He could have met this guy or gone to something about him. And I think it's interesting to think about that. Like Indiana Jones, like I said, he was supposed to be born in 1899. So in 1960, Indy would have been 61 years old. And if Indiana Jones had gone on to live to his mid-80s, he could have listened to The Cure on a Walkman.
I wish he had.
I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
That's true. They might come out with like a, like Raiders of the Lost Arcade.
For all we know, Harrison Ford has listened to The Cure on a Walkman.
I think he
could have
has.
happened.
Yeah, and Roy Chapman Andrews, he could have, like, this guy born in the 1800s could have listened to Elvis Presley and seen Some Like It Hot by Billy Wilder or seen North by Northwest by Hitchcock. Like, it's amazing to think that he could have lived so long and done so much and like still lived in a kind of modern time period as well.
I mean, he was born 2 centuries ago.
I'm realizing that I think of Hitchcock as being way older than some of his movies in the 60s.
Same.
I mean, there's kind of a bridge there because Psycho was during color time, but he shot it in black and white. Makes me think it's older.
Yeah, Psycho actually came out the next year. It came out in it came out the same year that Roy Chapman Andrews died, just later that year. Andrews died in March and Psycho came out in the fall or something. But if it's interesting to me to think about that and also like to think about Indy getting old and listening, I decided to The Cure. But that's
feel
my
like-
story. I hope you guys liked my story.
That was an awesome
I did
story.
a lot. Sorry, I'm still trying to think of what music I think Indiana Jones would listen to. Who did like We Built This City on Rock and Roll? Like I feel like that
Starship.
maybe
Jeffrey-
that's the kind of
No.
music
I think he
that
listens
wouldn't
to
listen
John
to
Williams
new
soundtracks.
wave.
He would no, I'm saying he could have listened to it.
Like,
Like
but would he have?
his granddaughter could have been like, "Grandpa, put this
Aw.
headphones on and
He
listen
seems
to
maybe
The Cure."
more like a straight up rock and roll guy. Or
no,
folk.
because he was like doing stuff in the 30s. He
I was
probably only
thinking
listened to like
jazz.
really old timey music.
No, but if he was around in the 80s.
He still's listening to his old timey music.
All right. So, my turn, huh?
Yes.
We because we knew we were going to do Raiders of the Lost Ark for this episode, we decided to rewatch the movie and say like what sticks out? What do we want to hear about? And there was one line basically near the beginning of the movie that I figured I would base my entire talk on this line. So at the cold open, he goes into this temple and he retrieves an idol, and then it gets stolen by Belloc, and he comes back and gives his class. And at the end of the class, Marcus Brody, who is affiliated with the university and the museum. I don't know his actual title. His job is he?
I don't know.
He's affiliated. He's
Yeah.
probably dean of something or other.
Yeah.
And he's talking to Indy. And he's like, "Oh, I had it in my hand. I almost had it. But I have these other things, and I'd like to sell them to the museum. Will you still buy them?" And Marcus says, "Sure, of course, the museum will buy them. We always do. And we're sure that you complied with the International Treaty for the Protection of Antiquities."
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not.
And so I'm like, "Oh, well, what's this treaty? Okay, let's talk about
Is
the
it a real
history of
treaty?
international treaties." No, it's not real. No, it was
Oh.
totally made up. But let's have some fun with some what ifs, okay? So first off, I couldn't decide how to take Marcus's line that he's sure that Indy complied with the treaty. That could be a wink, wink.
Yeah, like,
kind of,
I'm sure you
Say no more.
sure.
Don't tell me the details. I'm sure that you complied.
Right.
Or maybe he was just being sincere and he trusts Indy. So let's take that second one. Okay, if Indiana Jones, in getting this idol, complied with the International Treaty for the Protection of Antiquities, let's reverse engineer what that treaty must have been.
Yeah.
You know, what was okay to do.
But that's also funny
And-
to me if there's no treaty in real life. So they just made up that there was a treaty, even though he did all those things. Like they made that.
Well, we will get back to that. At the time they made the movie, such treaties existed.
Oh, but not. In the
But when it was
40s.
set,
In
when
the
it was
30s.
set, it did not. Yes. So I'm going to kind of mix it up here. Yes, we are trying to establish what does the treaty allow,
Right.
based
if,
on his
if what
actions.
he did was
Yes.
allowed in the treaty.
Extrapolating,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But also along the way, I learned a lot of things about how field work is done in archaeology. I'm going to mix all this up. What did he do wrong from our own current understanding, and what was just fun facts about archaeology. So
Hit me. I love archaeology.
The first thing of interest to me, because my judgment is the important judgment here. The first thing of interest that happens is that Alfred Molina picks a dart out of a tree and licks the point of the dart, and he's like, "Oh no!" and he spits it out, and he's like, "Oh, these are poisoned." And this can cut a few different ways. One, would an archaeologist ever do this? Almost certainly no. I mean, who does that? No normal person does this.
Even if you
Well,
wanted
I mean-
to taste it, you should like get it off on your fingers and then lick your fingers, not lick actually the sharp point of something.
Also, no.
Or just
I
don't
think you
do
should be
that.
like, is this poison? Well, let me see. Let me put it right in my mouth and see. But also,
Venom.
Yes. No, and that's a good point. If you lick venom and spit it out, you're not going to die from that. Unless you prick your tongue.
Because you're licking the dart.
Yeah. So that was the first thing. Yeah, they licked a dart. You don't do that because it's dangerous and also gross. But archaeologists sometimes do lick something. If
That's what she said.
the inside of their mouth, lollipops, No, you might be out in the field and you're doing a controlled dig and you're digging things up. Can't tell if it's a rock or a bone or whatever. If you clean it off and lick it and it sticks to your tongue, it's bone.
Oh.
Hells, yeah.
Yeah, and so that can be a
Oh,
quick
no.
check.
Now Zoe's really.
It's harder
out
than
there
you think to
licking.
clean bone. I have several like bones that I got from various places, and like,
Are you sure they're bones?
Did
Don't
you
go
try
lick
licking
them.
well,
Don't lick them.
is that a new song? Don't go licking bones. Set
Oh,
to
no.
The tune of "Don't go chasing waterfalls."
Yeah, sure.
This is getting inappropriate. This is it's an explicit show, so
Yep.
it's rated
We
R.
always check off explicit. But yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to, but you're supposed to do like a spectral analysis and determine that it's bone via less destructive means. You don't scrape it, you don't lick it, you don't do anything that might alter it. You try to keep it pristine. But people do anyway because you're out in the field and you don't have access to the.
I feel like I would lick
Technology.
a dinosaur bone, but not a human bone.
Vice
That's
versa.
interesting. Let's explore what that says about you.
I just feel like if I was out doing on a dinosaur dig and we found something that could be a bone, I would put it on my tongue to see if it's a bone.
Okay.
But if we were out like
On a people dig?
if we were like in a graveyard, I don't think I would just be sticking a bone
Just a
in my mouth.
graveyard.
Are you a grave robber in this scenario?
They're all grave robbers.
Well, what if you were on an archaeological dig looking for ancient people?
No.
No.
What if you didn't
No.
know if it was a person or a dinosaur and the only way to find out was by licking it?
Got to see what it tastes like.
It's like 50-50. It's
Is this a
person.
brontosaurus?
The
Tastes
bones
like a
look the
brontosaurus?
same.
This
so-
tastes like someone from Wisconsin. Okay, so lick bones, don't lick bones. Depends on whether your professor's looking.
Okay.
Again, there's so many. Okay.
So he uses a treasure map, which there's no treasure map. Realistically, you have an area you want to excavate, and you block out, you do a grid, and you dig, and there's not a map to get there because it's so old and paper degrades. And if you had a document like that, that would be archaeologically significant, and you'd want to preserve it and have that in a museum, and not bring it into the field with you where it's going to get destroyed. You'd scan it and take a printout of it and use that as your map.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he shouldn't just take the treasure map in with him like it's not itself a kind of treasure.
Yeah, a lot of the things about this cold opening scene that run counter to common practice are not recognizing things that are actually significant from a scientific
Right.
standpoint.
He just wants that gold.
He's just going after the idol. That's it.
Yeah.
So Indy and Alfred Molina go into the temple without taking any pictures, without surveying the outside area to determine
That's true.
any kind of time period, setting it in a context, and really telling the whole story. They just go in.
Yeah, what are they going to say? They're going to be like, well, we found this idol. It's on display in a museum, and it's like, it's from Peru, and that's all we
the
got.
plaque is like,
Peru question mark? Because he's not even speaking. I don't want to jump on what you're saying here, but he's not even talking to the Jovito people.
Nope.
Like Belloc does, but he doesn't. So he doesn't even know that much about it, maybe. Sorry. I don't know if you're already going to talk about that.
No, I didn't. But that is a good point. And that'll come up in the stuff with the treaties and needing to have permission from the local people. So one thing that was pretty accurate is that, yes, lots of bugs get on you. There's a scene where both of them are covered in tarantulas.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's not always tarantulas, but word is that when you're on digs, you're in the ground, you're going to get scorpions and centipedes and ants and creepy crawlies all over you all the time. And other, flying bugs. You're going to get mosquitoes and tsetse flies and all kinds of things.
I mean, and that's in Temple of Doom, that whole like room full of bugs that are crawling all over them. Spiders are like, to me, as snakes are to Indy. I don't like them, and they're around me too much.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why is it always spiders?
I think,
Yeah.
well, and the issue with being afraid of spiders versus snakes is like you're so much more likely to encounter a spider in the world. I mean, I guess if you live in California, there might be a lot of snakes, but
Not as many as there are spiders,
Yeah, lots of spiders.
which in turn are blown away by ants.
Not scared of ants, though. Except for,
I wouldn't want a
in
whole lot of
Texas-
them on me.
in Texas, we had these big, like, fire ant hills that were like 1 foot, 2 foot hills of ants. And one of my cousins put me in one once.
Oh, God. You have the best family.
Boys are mean.
All right. Next order of business. Booby traps.
Booby traps?
That's what I said. Booby traps. Goonies. So, there are often curses inscribed in the entrance to a lot of places of interest because they don't want people to rob them, loot
Yeah,
them,
like in
like
Egypt and
Indiana
stuff.
Jones.
Yeah.
But booby traps specifically, if they were there and they still worked after, 1,000 years, that would be the great find of this location. Fuck the idol. It's not about the idol. Everybody, okay, there's an idol. We have tons of idols, but a working system of booby traps, 1,000 years old, we could not build that today and have it last that long.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that would spawn a whole new field, a whole new set of grants of people trying to investigate this culture and figure out how they managed to build these booby traps.
I wonder what the oldest known booby trap is, or if they had any, but they just didn't work anymore.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, maybe they could find evidence that something hooked up with rope or something hooked up with this or that. It may have worked for a couple of years before it degraded.
I mean, booby traps are great for like a role-playing game or also like Goonies, because then you don't always have to be interacting with a character, but you can still be in danger.
Yeah, also in Goonies, I think, I was about to say it's not as old, but it's probably about 300-400 years old. That's way too old for a booby trap to work. In D&D, though, maybe it was just last week that they said it.
Well, often it's like the Crips have booby traps.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A second thing about booby traps is that the professors, the PhDs with a lot of experience, the high up people who organize these digs, they don't go into these places on their own. They send students to do the
Right.
grunt work for
They're
them.
interns or something.
And they're like, find out everything, do it in the proper manner that I taught you, and get back to me, and I'll take credit for it. So they'd be sending their students in to these booby traps.
Sounds right.
Okay. The big one here is that in taking the idol, he set in motion the destruction of the entire site.
But you don't think that would just be fine under a treaty?
I mean, maybe.
Get an idol, but make sure you destroy the entire thing. Bring it down around your ears.
Later, they try to set this up in the film that it's done in order to save his life. He has to escape. He's in the Well of Souls with this huge statue.
I get so upset about that. I'm like, I can't believe he's destroying that huge statue and that whole wall.
That wall was 20 feet high, 50 feet wide, and it was absolutely covered with engravings,
Hieroglyphics.
all kinds of stuff that told probably the whole story of that place.
Yeah,
And he
where they
crashed
kept
the statue through the wall.
Where they kept the Ark of the Covenant and he
Yeah.
crashes the whole thing.
Yeah. So here we are back at this temple, and taking the idol without compensating for the weight destroys the whole temple.
First of all, also, what? Why was he so wrong? Like, if that's fully gold, he needed more sand, not less sand.
Right.
I'm looking
Yeah.
at it and I'm like, you need more sand
Okay.
than that.
So yeah, he put sand in a bag. He knew what he was going into, so he knew that if he guessed wrong, he'd destroy the place, and he did it on purpose. Secondly, he's supposed to be a scientist. I mean, okay, it's archaeology, but still, he's supposed to be a scientist, and he gets a bag that's roughly the size of the idol, maybe twice as big. Gold is 19.3 grams per cubic centimeter. Sand, 1.6.
Right. You
So
would need a huge,
gold-
huge bag of sand.
Gold is 12 times as heavy as sand.
Can he just
And he
use
got-
something other than sand, maybe?
A rock or anything that's expected to be the same weight as the idol, but this was probably 1/10 the weight of the idol.
Yeah, was this before like Lucas and Spielberg? It was generally known that gold was heavy.
This was before scales existed. Yeah. So he did get the idol, and in the process lost all of the worthwhile archaeology.
I know.
But it's shiny.
Um,
and then
then-
he didn't even get the item.
And then he didn't get the idol. He got other items of interest that he sells to the museum with no context, no, I don't know what a detective would call chain of evidence, any
Right.
kind of link to where it came from, what it was about, why it was there.
Yeah, I mean, we
How old
watched
it
this
was.
archaeology show, and they put a grid out. They put little flags where everything are. They take a whole list. Like, this was found here at this level in this area of the grid, and he just is like, "Here's some stuff I
Yeah.
found."
They'll find something 50 feet away, but in a certain kind of ground. And they'll be like, oh, this dates this layer of ground at sometime between 1200 and 300 CE. So then in another part of the site, they'll find something in the same kind of ground. They know how old it is.
This is why he's like more of a treasure hunter. When Belloc is like, "You're not that different from me.
That's right.
You're a treasure hunter."
Yeah. So when George Lucas pitched this to Steven Spielberg and to the producers, the money people, he describes Indiana Jones.
Ooh.
He is an archaeologist and an anthropologist, a PhD. He is a doctor. He's a college professor. What happened is he's also sort of a rough and tumble guy, but he got involved in going in and getting antiquities, sort of searching out antiquities. And it became a very lucrative profession. So he, rather than be an archaeologist, he became sort of an outlaw archaeologist. He really started being a grave robber for hire, is what it really came down to. And the
Yeah.
museums would hire him to steal things out of tombs and stuff.
Yeah, that.
So-
yeah.
So that implies that the museums know exactly what kind of shit he's doing and are just like the ends are worth the means. But I do think that kind of falls through when you think about like to put something in a museum. The point is like to have a plaque and have so
to
his
contextualize it.
his means aren't necessarily conducive to museum work.
Well, did they
but-
keep going with that, or did they push back and say no? He can't just be a treasure hunter.
No, they ran with it, and that kind of justifies the character. He is an archaeologist, but when he's out in the field doing this stuff, he's not being an archaeologist. Then he's being a grave robber.
If you look at what Indy's done, he's not following the rules of archaeology of like taking his time and using a little brush to brush things away,
Well,
or
also he can't always because he's like his life is actively in danger most of the time.
Most of the time.
but that's why he's an
But also
adventure
maybe-
archaeologist.
Maybe
and
his
not
life
just an
is in danger
archaeologist.
because he's going in and doing
Yes,
just things
because
like
he
that.
didn't get permission from
The
the
Jovito.
country to say it's okay to dig here and only you, and we'll let you cordon this off and bring your students and do it right. And that's why his life's in danger.
Right. Yeah.
But while we're talking about what Raiders did wrong about all this, one thing they actually got pretty right is the shots of the Nazis excavating Tanis. There's an old silent film from the 1920s of this archaeologist named Henry Field. Interesting fact: the Field Museum in Chicago, nothing to do with Henry Field.
I was just going to look that up. I was like, oh, is that the Field Museum?
Yeah, no, that was named after some guy named Marshall Field who owned some department stores and funded the museum.
The Field Museum is Marshall Field's? That's a,
Oh, you know Marshall Field?
yeah, it's a store.
Well,
Marshall Field.
oh, is that Marshall's? Is it from?
Maybe. I don't know.
From
I
LA?
know it used to be a department store.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah. So not this guy, but this guy shot film of running a dig in Iraq, and the carts, the harnesses, the workers, it all looked exactly like how they showed in the movie, and they probably used that. The one thing that was very different about the actual way they ran it was they ran it with child labor. There was dozens of child laborers carrying dirt across the site all the time, and in the movie, it
Not
was
surprised.
grown-ups. Yeah,
Not surprised.
yeah. So that's the movie. Now let's talk about real life. Okay, so the actual laws and treaties involved with archaeology before 1900, basically nothing. Some countries had some laws that were not enforced and not deemed very important. But then starting with the 20th century, in 1903, El Salvador claims all cultural property for the state, only allowing the export of multiple artifacts. I kind of had to look that up, even though I shouldn't have had to. Multiple artifacts are artifacts that there are multiple copies of the same thing.
Okay.
If something is unique, it can't leave. If there's multiples, they'll keep interesting ones, the biggest, the oldest, the first found. But at some point,
Right. You
they
don't have to
let
keep
them-
every single one.
yeah,
of
they let them be exported. And that was a common stipulation.
Okay.
In 1932, Greece did kind of the same thing, but adding that collectors and dealers had to be registered with the country. And again, only allowing the sale of multiples.
And that was in the 30s.
Yeah.
Okay.
So big jump there. Italy jumped in 1939, claiming all cultural property more than 50 years old, and had to approve exports, allowed the export of declined items. The state declines to keep them.
Okay.
So right around this time, this guy named Roerich introduced the Roerich Pact. 1935, the Treaty on the Protection of Artistic and Scientific Institutions and Historic Monuments. The most important idea of the pact is the legal recognition that the defense of cultural objects is more important than the use or destruction of a culture for military purposes. And the protection of culture always has precedence over any military necessity.
Oh, yeah.
This was ratified by 21 countries.
That's great.
It kind of
right?
was a precursor to, it wasn't worldwide recognized as that important until World War II came around, and the Nazis plundered innumerable valuable artifacts and destroyed what they deemed degenerate art. And
Yeah.
they were a big driving force toward adoption of the Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. This was in 1954, and it was the first international treaty that focuses exclusively on the protection of cultural property in armed conflict. So it wasn't as broad as the Roerich Pact, but it dove deeper into actual protections in wartime. It claimed that any damage to cultural property, irrespective of the people it belongs to, is a damage to the cultural heritage of all humanity because every people contributes to the world's culture. Broadly, it requires that state parties adopt protection measures during peacetime for the safeguarding of cultural property. Such measures include the preparation of inventories, preparation for the removal of movable cultural property, and the designation of competent authorities responsible for the safeguarding of cultural property. So before war happens, make sure that you can get stuff out of the way and protect it.
Mm-hmm.
Parties undertake to respect cultural property not only located within their own territory, but also within territory of other state parties during times of conflict and occupation. They agree to refrain from using cultural property and its immediate surroundings for purposes likely to expose it to destruction or damage in the event of armed conflicts, and don't attack other people's
Yeah.
cultural property.
Yeah.
So this was very forward looking, and has been shown to be successful. An example of a successful implementation of the Hague Convention was the Gulf War, in which many members of the coalition forces who were either party to the convention or, in the instance of the US, were not party, but they obeyed it anyway, accepted the convention's rules, most notably by creating a no-fire target list of places where cultural property was known to exist.
That's great.
Yeah. But that just covers wartime. It wasn't until 1970 at the UNESCO Convention, that's the United Nations Environmental, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, 1970 Convention on the means of prohibiting the illicit export, import, and transfer of ownership of cultural property. It was the most powerful international antiquities agreement to date, and it's still in place today. It's still the most powerful.
So you can't just steal it. You have to go through some kind of channels.
That's right. That's right. It's a multilateral agreement with all signatories that gives members the right to recover stolen or illegally exported antiquities from other member countries, including the United States. So in 1970s, the U.S. was actually signing treaties that held it accountable for something. That doesn't seem to happen that much lately. There were over 90 signatory countries as of 2001. And probably more important, and this is 1983. This is right around Raiders' time, but maybe a couple years after.
So Indy definitely
American
couldn't have
law.
been doing what he was doing if he'd been around in the 70s.
Right.
Yeah, or any time after 1983, maybe, because the U.S., that is when, you see, the way it works, at least with the U.S., is we don't just sign treaties. A treaty is non-binding on the U.S. We sign treaties and we agree to write a law for ourselves. And so we agreed to the treaty, but then created a law called CPIA, the Convention on Cultural Property Implementation Act. It's a U.S. law, whereas UNESCO is multilateral for all signatories, but the U.S. law is bilateral. It allows us to create bilateral agreements with other countries that you don't take our artifacts, we don't take yours. And so through this CPIA law, the United States was able to sign bilateral agreements with a lot of Mesoamerican, South American, European, and Asian countries who did not sign onto UNESCO for the multilateral agreement. They weren't willing to say, we'll return cultural artifacts to everybody, but between us and the US, we'll make that. And it's something, whereas previously there was nothing. And what it says is that designated archaeological and ethnological materials require an export license from their country of origin to be imported to the United States, or proof that the object left the country of origin before the effective date of the agreement. And so since 1983, there's been a lot of control over cultural artifacts leaving, even when it's not wartime.
That's good.
Yeah. One country that notably has stayed away from all such agreements is Switzerland. In addition to being neutral in all other respects, they're neutral here, which may explain the country's importance to antiquities smuggling. They're the Cayman Island
The center of it.
of antiquities smuggling. If you can get your cultural artifacts into Switzerland, then you
They
can
don't
get them
have
back out of Switzerland,
Oh,
and there's no direct link with anybody that has a treaty or a law.
weird.
Uh,
Weird that they're allowed to do that and that they do that.
and so that is the status of international treaties for the protection of antiquities.
Thank you.
Raiders of the Lost Ark being set in, 1935 or so?
Maybe I'll look and see.
That would have been about the time of the Rorik Pact, but definitely before any kind of treaties that had any kind of teeth.
1936.
36, yeah.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah,
probably,
they just did whatever the heck.
they probably wrote this with UNESCO in mind, And since it was signed in 83, probably was in motion in the US and they knew this was happening. And they're like, okay, this treaty is happening in the US. We know about it. We'll refer to it
Right.
and pretend that it was there in 1936.
Well, to make it seem like he's not a grave robber, unless it was like you said, it was supposed to be a wink, wink. Oh, we know you're following the treaties, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Say no more.
I feel like they're not super clear about that because there is still to this day, most people come down on the side of Indy was not a good archaeologist, but that is more of a more contemporary argument. And in the past, it's like so many people were inspired to become archaeologists because of these movies, you know?
Right.
So people weren't being like, because he's a terrible archaeologist,
Right.
who doesn't follow the rules or do archaeology, but is actually treasure hunting. How about you, Zoe? Oh, also, thank you, Brian. That
You
was
are
Yes,
welcome.
that
really
was I
fun.
like knowing all that and thinking about it.
Thank you for allowing me to hear one random line in a movie and just chase it wherever it goes.
I have several different sections of my trivia this time.
Okay, but
There's-
first I want to check in on with you. How
Oh,
are you
I'm
doing over there
okay.
with your COVID vaccine sickness?
I'm all right. I keep having to take this sweater on and off because of hot and cold flashes, but I'm drinking some bubbly. I'm okay as for right now.
You're not in a fever haze?
Not currently.
Oh, that could make the
unless-
talk more interesting.
A I know. Could you be in a fever haze?
Could I be any more in a fever haze? Yeah, I have several sections, like segments here. Because there's a lot of really fun trivia for this movie. So my first section is called You and I Are Very Much Alike. So George Lucas had an Alaskan Malamute dog named Indiana, which was the inspiration for the name Indiana Jones, and also was the inspiration for Chewbacca. Like he kind of fashioned his Chewbacca after his dog.
Aw.
And
Now I can picture the dog.
Yep. Apparently, John Rhys Davies really reminded Spielberg of Falstaff from
Oh.
Shakespeare's Henrietta, and that was ended up being like one of the character inspiration notes for Sala was to be like a Falstaffian figure, which I totally see now that I'm.
I am the monarch of the
Yeah.
sea.
We just saw John Rhys Davies in a bad movie, didn't we?
Yes, Grizzly 2. He was playing a French Canadian trapper. Yeah.
Fur trader.
By bad, you mean play a bad guy, or it was bad?
It's a bad
It
movie.
was real bad.
Tot is that tot? We're saying tot. I know it's
T-H-O-T?
T-O-H-T, yeah.
Oh, T-O-H-T. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that.
He was totally based on Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS.
Yeah,
in
Himmler was the one that was
Nazi
really
Germany.
into like paranormal stuff.
Right, who's also totally like inspiring, like in Jojo Rabbit, that's a lot of like the
It is taught.
tot. Yeah, so he was totally supposed to look like him, which also makes sense. This one's fun. Have you ever considered having a career where you just mostly play monkeys? Because Frank Welker, who did the voice of the monkey in this movie, was also the voice of Abu in Aladdin.
Oh.
I am surprised that that's just a person doing that voice. I figured they found some sounds that they captured.
No, it's straight up a
like,
a voice actor. I would love to like be so good at like I don't know, being a monkey or like one animal impression that I'm just like the go-to monkey guy,
Go-to monkey guy.
That's my
the
specialty.
story of Zoe Gray.
Last one in this segment, which is kind of about like the inspirations for things. On a slightly different vein, Melissa Matheson came to visit the set because she was married to Harrison Ford at the time. And she and Steven Spielberg wound up talking. And that was when E.T., like the concept of E.T., like blossomed during shooting breaks of Raiders.
Wow.
Out of some of those like conversations. Like I think that's where like the pitch for ET came from,
That's cool.
which is fun. I just can't imagine having so many good movies as a, you know,
Yeah.
or like iconic movies.
Very, very iconic, especially from the 80s, our childhood.
Our next session is called Bad Dates.
Bad
This is all about just the crazy things that happened on okay, so like Harrison Ford did most of the stunt work for the things he does in this movie, including the time when he gets dragged behind a truck. That stunt was inspired by John Ford's movie Stagecoach, and they wanted to try it. And Harrison Ford did most of the stunt work. He ended up bruising his ribs. But when he was
we
like,
saw that recently.
yeah,
I think it was either like a soldier or a Native American who went underneath the coach.
I mean, it's such a cool
Oh, yeah.
stunt.
I remember
Yeah.
that now. Yeah.
But he did get hurt doing it. But when he was like asked about it later, like, were you were you worried about doing that? He said, if it was really dangerous, they would have filmed more of the movie first.
That's good logic.
He also had to actually outrun that boulder like for like 10 different takes over and over.
But it wasn't a
And-
real boulder, right?
Well,
It was,
I'm
yeah,
sure
it was
wasn't
made
solid
out
rock.
of, I mean, it wasn't made out of actual boulder material, but
You mean stone?
boulder material. What do they make boulders out of?
Hey, what are we going to make this boulder out of?
it was like a fiber thing, but
Don't
still
use
like
gold;
having
it'll be
to-
too heavy.
Okay.
One thing that was real was the out of control airplane ran over Harrison Ford's knee. But
the one where he's like fighting the big guy when they're trying to. Okay.
but
Oh.
the heat, they were filming in Tunisia and it was just horrible apparently. Like all of the cast and crew got sick except for Steven Spielberg because he only ate food that he brought from home, which was mostly like cans of SpaghettiOs. Like everyone was sick. It was crazy hot and the heat turned the rubber of the tire of that airplane so soft that it didn't crush the bone in his knee. It just tore a ligament.
Wow.
And he just wrapped it
He
in
had a
ice
whole-
and kept filming.
Airplane drive over him.
Yes.
Wow.
Alfred
I mean, it was a small, like, one-man airplane, but yeah,
but
still.
I wouldn't
Still.
even want a bicycle to run over my knee.
A bicycle,
I mean, that would hurt.
I guess.
We talked about Alfred Molina. This was his first credited screen role. And
I know,
he
he's so
spent
cute and
his
young.
first day on set covered in tarantulas.
Oh, baby.
Imagine that being like your intro to like
I don't want to.
And you have to lick a poison dart. They probably had a stuntman do that.
and in the 7,000 snakes in the there were 7,000 snakes in the Well of Souls scene. They also like had to like make like not all of those were real snakes because they were like going around to every like pet store just trying to get so many snakes. But some of them were real and a python bit the hand of first assistant director David Tomlin and would not let go. And so he told them to grab the snake like by its tail and like whip, like undulate its body like a whip so that it would have to let go. And they did. And the snake wasn't hurt and he went and got medical attention. So basically filming this just sounds like genuinely
Well,
dangerous.
At least it was a python.
Yeah.
They don't have teeth. They do have like a ribbed cartilage, and it will cause you to bleed, but not like fangs would do.
Well, but like, it just sounds like they don't have any kind of treaties for the safety of humans at this point. There's no I mean, don't they have unions? Aren't they taking care of these people? Letting them be bitten by snakes
Yeah.
does not seem like it's union approved.
The body double for Karen Allen wouldn't go into the snake pit. Like she was like, I'm not doing that. I guess because lots of them were real snakes that might bite you.
Yeah.
So they got this like snake handler, Stephen Edge, who just like shaved his legs and put on a dress and stood in for Marion instead. But what's the snake that is that
Cobra.
Indy faces off with, a
A
cobra.
cobra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they had a pane of like glass or like between them in the real thing.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see a reflection
Well,
of the cobra.
it was necessary because it did like spit stuff at the glass.
Wow. Why do
So,
they need? Yeah,
I don't
that was
know.
a lot.
Why did they need to do all of that for real? Not sure. Why
So that
did
they don't have to hire Ray Harryhausen to make fake snakes.
I have two pieces of audio trivia, sound effect trivia, which is when Indy in the opening sequence, the plane has to start in the water. They use the same sound as when the Millennium Falcon's hyperdrive engine fails.
Oh.
Yeah. And many of the body blow sounds were made from them hitting a pile of leather jackets with a baseball bat, which is so fucking cool, you guys.
Those punches were so unreasonably loud.
They were very strong. In
Well,
the
it was
Foley
hitting
Force.
leather jackets with a baseball bat. And then here's just a couple pieces of generalized trivia. I love the part at the beginning where the Paramount logo fades into the real mountain, and
That's
and
cool.
he really wanted to do that, so they got one of their producers to just go all over Hawaii to just find just drive and drive and drive until they find the perfect peaks that look just like the Paramount logo. But it's such a good transition. When the monkey does a little Nazi salute. They spent like days trying to figure out how to make the monkey do that, and it wouldn't do it. So
Good monkey.
they ended up putting like a grapes on a fishing line and like putting it right behind the camera so it would reach for them. And they had to get like a lot of takes until it looked enough like a Heil Hitler salute.
Yeah.
Oh God, I think this is hilarious. In the German versions of the film had to be dubbed with different actors doing the German parts because the American actors in the original movie, their German accents were really, really bad, and they just straight up said like wrong phrase. Like it was not like script supervised well enough with the parts in German. So when they tried to watch
That's
the movie
funny.
in Germany, they were like, we have to like redo this because it's embarrassing. They originally had an R rating because of the exploding head.
Right.
And so what they had to
That's
do,
such a good spot.
what
or
they
good part.
decided to do to make it less graphic and to not get an R rating was to put layers of fire in front of it, which doesn't seem like less violent to me. But
I mean, that melting face was so. I just loved that when I was a kid. I was
Todd's
like,
face melts. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, I was like, this is amazing. What am I watching?
yeah. I like it when it's kind of grody. I think that's why I like Temple of Doom as well.
I mean, it was gross, but it also wasn't like that realistic. So it was just like such a good idea of like someone's face melting off,
Yeah.
but it didn't look real.
Well, it was like
per se.
it became super popular after the movie. The makeup artist who did it was named Chris Wallace, and he's had to field like a million calls from like people saying they loved it, and also from other like makeup artist, special effect people who were like, I want to do something like this in my movie. How did you do that? Yeah, because it was just it was baller. Yeah. Lastly, I just want to talk a little about Marion, who I had a huge crush on. I think Karen Ellen is beautiful and so like whip smart and funny, and I love the character.
Yeah, I love her
but-
voice.
Yeah, yeah. And also, there was an interview that I read, maybe last year before, that was just extremely upsetting. Between Lawrence Kasdan, who I think he was a writer on this, and I think he ended up writing on Empire Strikes Back.
Sure,
Yeah. And George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. And this is this interview between them talking like while they were in development about the character of Marion. So Kasdan says, I like it if they already had a relationship at one point because then you don't have to build it. George Lucas says, I was thinking that this old guy could have been his mentor. He could have known this little girl when she was just a kid, had an affair with her when she was 11. And Kasdan says, and he was 42.
What?
Lucas.
What?
He hasn't seen her
Wait.
in 12 years. Now she's 22. It's a real strange relationship. Spielberg says, she had better be older than 22. Lucas says, he's 35 and he knew her 10 years ago when he was 25 and she was only 12.
What?
It would be amusing to make her slightly young at the time. Spielberg.
That's slightly young.
Amusing. I'm not sure.
Yep. Spielberg. And promiscuous. She came on to him.
What? No. Throw them on the
Lucas.
fire.
15 is right on
Let
the
their
edge.
faces melt.
15 is right on the edge. I know it's an outrageous idea, but it is interesting. When she's 16 or 17, it's not interesting anymore. But if she was 15 and he was 25 and they actually had an affair the last time they met and she was madly in love with him and he ...
I just had a sadness run from the top of my head all the way down my body.
Right. I mean, it's like...
It'd be like interesting. Like, wouldn't that make Indy interesting if he was a 25-year-old who had sex with a promiscuous 12-year-old?
Right, and that's the thing is that Spielberg
Oh my
pushes back at the
God.
beginning. Like, she better not be 11, but like 12 to 15, I guess that's fine. And I mean, we already know kind of George Lucas is not, you know, it's
He has
already
some
kind
weird
of in
ideas
the
about
public
age.
eye, right? But the fact that Spielberg was also just in the room and like only minorly pushed back,
Right,
does
like she
kind
could be
of-
15.
yeah,
Well, I mean, Spielberg has like maybe 3 movies that star women.
right. Lawrence Kasdan ended up leaving her age out of the dialogue, just having Marion tell Indy that I've learned to hate you in the last 10 years. I was a child, which I think I interpreted when I saw it, not literally.
Yeah,
it was like that kind of
metaphorical
idea of like,
child,
I
like-
was young, I didn't know what I was doing, and you
Right,
broke
like
my
I was
heart.
emotionally.
Like I was 22. I was
Not
a
like
child.
I was actually literally had not hit puberty.
Yeah, but I guess we don't know. Like, did they end up saying it could be 15?
Well,
What
I
are we
think,
supposed to
I
think?
think at the time of filming, well, and that's the thing is since they're adults now, the age difference, especially between the actors, actually is not that different than many movies like that. And we were talking about how it was inspired by Bond earlier. It's like it's not that different than a lot of male-female relationships in movies of this ilk, but it is fucked up when you think about the fact that 10 years previously, even if she's 25 here and he's 35, she would have been 15 years old with a 25-year-old, you know, like that. And we don't always think about that because it is different when you're both adults.
I like
but
to think of him as a good guy, and all it shows is what the idea
right.
of a good guy was in the early 80s.
Well, because he is
to these
supposed to
men.
be a good guy. I think that Spielberg and Lucas and the people making this movie and like Harrison Ford with all his charisma aren't like, I'm playing an asshole who would statutorily rape someone, but they just felt like that's slightly pushing the boundaries in an interesting way and not making him bad. Like they definitely weren't trying to make him bad, but that just reveals their own mindset about it, you know?
Well, that was great.
Oh, and I am tasked with writing an Indiana Jones song, which I have not yet done because I've been a little bit dead.
Ah.
But by the time this episode comes out, it will be tacked on to the end. And who
It
knows
will be
what it's
lovingly
gonna be
placed
about.
at the end. Lovingly placed at the end.
Lovingly tacked on.
Mm-hmm.
I can't wait. I'm so excited to hear that.
I'm so excited to figure out what I'm going to write about.
Like Film Fam, inspired by true events. Subscribe to hear more stories that inspired our favorite films.
For photos and links from the show and other shenanigans, follow us on Instagram at FilmFamPodcast, on Twitter at FilmFam_podcast, on Facebook at FilmFam Inspired by True Events.
If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or films whose inspiration you'd like us to explore, you can email us at filmfampodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye. And stop.
I watched a movie yesterday about this guy who's a professor. It started strong, like right away. He's suave and such a snazzy dresser. Yes, sir, and he needs to go find this ancient ancient rock in a cave. And he's swinging on vines to get there, 'cause he's so brave. He's kind of like Tarzan, but with a lasso, but otherwise a lot like Tarzan. And he has to fight some cavemen and also some pirates, but mostly just cavemen. Then he goes spiders. Why does it so often have to be spiders? I'm just a man with a lasso in hand, trying to find old rocks. It's set in the future, the past, the 1960s. He meets a woman in a bar. He saves her life and drinks some whiskey. I think I've got this down so far. And he's played by Harry Styles. No, it's a macho name. That guy from 2020, Call of the Wild fame. And he's looking for an ark, a really big boat. Yeah, I think it was Noah's Ark. And that's where the pirates are. I knew there were pirates and probably also sharks. And ocean spiders. He says, why does it so often have to be spiders? I'm just a man with a lasso in hand, trying to find old rocks. And I remember a sandbag and a boulder and some funny lines. I remember a staircase and Egypt, and he's swinging on vines. And I think I've covered the breadth of the film in this detailed sung recap. I know, 'cause I watched it all from the comfy chair with the plushy pillows and temperate air, with the cozy blanket that I can wrap. And I might have gotten through 15 minutes and fallen into a nap. But I remember, yes, I surely remember when he said, spiders, why does it so often have to be spiders? I'm just a man with a lasso in hand, trying to find old rocks. The history professor, collector of treasure and pith. No, how could I forget the name? Louisiana Smith.